thinking better and thinking together about life's most important issues. A place to finally meet in the middle, to think freely and reasonably about the big questions of life. This is Thinker Sensitive. Welcome to another episode of Thinker Sensitive. I'm your host, Ryan Ragazine. Hope you had a great Memorial Day weekend. My wife and I took a road trip down to Mesa Verde National Park, which was really cool. And then we visited two mountain towns, Durango and Telluride, which were also very cool and very beautiful. But now we are back at home and we are back to work. So today we're going to be looking at the pragmatic value of faith, or the practical benefits of belief in a higher power. While being held in prison in Germany for his suspected role in an assassination plot against Hitler, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a man of faith, was renowned amongst his prison mates for his calm demeanor, fortitude, and joyful spirit. Even in the midst of bombings, air raids, and great uncertainty regarding his future, his peers found immense comfort in his care, always encouraging and uplifting those around him. Bonhoeffer's faith in God gave him a kind of strength that many of his prison mates simply did not possess, allowing him to face adversity with courage and opposition with integrity, even all the way up to his inevitable execution at the hands of the Nazis in April 1945 at a German concentration camp in Flossenburg, where he voluntarily laid down his life for and died in solidarity with the Jewish people. He did this freely of his own choosing. See, Bonhoeffer had an opportunity to flee to the US. Before his arrest, he was actually on a boat to New York City. But he ultimately chose to turn around and stay in Germany and suffer with his people instead. A resilient faith made a resilient man. Bonhoeffer is not the only person who has a story that testifies to the personal benefits and value of faith in God. My personal story also reflects this. To keep it short, when I was in graduate school, I was diagnosed with a severe anxiety disorder and severe OCD. It got so bad, so debilitating, so paralyzing that life was simply not worth living anymore. I wouldn't wish what I went through on my worst enemy. Looking back on that experience, I probably would have killed myself if I didn't believe in God. It was this fundamental belief that kept me going, kept me hoping, and kept me alive. My belief in God literally saved my life. There is a ton of research today that demonstrates the pragmatic value of belief in a higher power, particularly the psychological, emotional, and physical benefits of such belief. This is an area that I have not dug into much, in large part because I'm not a huge pragmatist. But regardless, it is still a very relevant and very important topic. So today, I want to take a look at the recent data and research in order to establish the pragmatic value of belief in God. I'm going to be doing a little more reading and a little less paraphrasing today. I know, I'm taking the lazy route on this episode. But I do think it's good to hear this stuff from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So let's jump right in. I'm going to start with an excerpt from an article posted by the Association for Psychological Science in 2011. Although religious belief is a cornerstone for roughly 85% of the world's population, it has never been the most popular subject of study among psychologists. However, there has been a surge of interest in religion within the past 2 years, and the symposium held at the APS 21st Annual Convention highlighted recent research on this topic. Michael Inslicht, University of Toronto, and Kristen Lauren, University of Waterloo, presenting on behalf of Aaron C.K., discussed their findings on how religion affects people's daily lives. A basic finding is that religion supports people's need to feel personal control over events in their lives and reduces anxiety in the face of events that are out of their control or that simply do not meet their expectations. But there's more to it than that. Lauren's presentation centered around Kay's compensatory control model, which holds that, quote, it's not only the belief in personal control that helps protect people against feelings of randomness, disorder, and chaos, but also the belief that the world is under control and under the control of God, end quote. Thus, a belief in a controlling God may be interchangeable with a sense of personal control and helps one to deal with events that are genuinely beyond their control. Inslicht's research found a more direct neurophysiological effect. Believers showed lower activity in their anterior cingulate cortex than did non-believers after making an error in a Stroop task, suggesting they were less anxious and distressed about their mistakes. Religion, it was suggested, could buffer people from the effective consequences of their own errors. End quote. Continuing, according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, quote, religion gives people something to believe in, provides a sense of structure, and typically offers a group of people to connect with over similar beliefs. These facets can have a large positive impact on mental health. Research suggests that religiosity reduces suicide rates, alcoholism, and drug use. End quote. Moving along, an article by Sarah Regan posted on mindbodygreen.com in March sums up the findings of a recent study in the Journal of Religion and Health. Here's a sizable excerpt. Based on the findings, it appears those who feel accountable to a higher power also experience greater mental well-being. Of the 4 variables of psychological well-being, i.e., mattering to others, dignity, feeling meaning in one's life, and happiness, participants with theistic accountability, the feeling that one is accountable to a higher power, had higher levels of the first 3 with no association to overall happiness. The research also found that when theistic accountability was paired with prayer, associations to mental health were even higher. Those with theistic accountability welcome responsibilities that are associated with their faith and view accountability to God as a gift that helps them lead happy and successful lives. Study co-author Blake Victor Kent explains, adding, quote, accountability has been examined philosophically as a virtue relevant to the spiritual life, but until now, no one had quantified it, end quote. And as Lisa Miller, PhD, an award-winning researcher in spirituality and psychology, and the author of The Awakened Brain recently explained on the Mind Body Green podcast, spirituality is important for not only mental health, but physical brain health as well, with stark differences observed in the brains of spiritual people versus non-spiritual people. When Miller studied MRI scans of people who had struggled with feelings of sadness, she says, quote, people who had a spiritual response to suffering showed entirely different brains. They showed not thinning, but thickening across the regions of perception and reflection. The parietal, precuneus, and occipital regions, end quote. She adds that prayer, quote, opens up our direct relationship with God, the loving guidance spirit in and through life, end quote. So it makes sense that praying, along with theistic accountability, would further bolster the potential mental benefits of spirituality. As lead author of the study, Matt Bradshaw, PhD, says, quote, humans are social creatures, and our psychological health is bound up in positive and constructive relationships, not only with other people, but also with God. End quote. To quickly add to Sarah's article, researchers at the Mayo Clinic have concluded, quote, most studies have shown that religious involvement and spirituality are associated with better health outcomes, including greater longevity, coping skills, and health related quality of life, even during terminal illness, and less anxiety, depression, and suicide. Several studies have shown that addressing the spiritual needs of the patient may enhance recovery from illness. End quote. If you want to read more about this, a Forbes article written in 2019 by Nicole Roberts entitled Science Says Religion is Good for Your Health sums up the relevant findings from a bunch of different disciplines and areas of study. Belief in a higher power is also vital in rehab and addiction recovery, giving people motivation, meaning, purpose, and hope. According to a 2020 article by Chris Elkins at drugrehab.com, quote, the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous were among the first people to recognize the impact that spirituality has on recovery from addiction. They were also among the first to coin the term higher power. Here's an excerpt from his article. In describing the steps they took to recover from alcoholism, the founders of AA wrote that they, quote, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, end quote. The term higher power, or HP, is used throughout the big book of AA to reference the power that was greater than they were. The founders of AA described their higher power as God, and they say many of them believed in the Christian God. But they make it clear that not everyone must believe in that God to achieve a spiritual awakening. They describe a higher power as, quote, God as we understood him, end quote. Numerous 12-step programs have adopted the same belief and terminology to describe recovery from an array of addictions, behavioral issues, and other problems. The process of experiencing a spiritual awakening and surrendering oneself to a higher power is crucial to success in the programs. End quote. With all of this stated, and with all of this in mind, the findings from academic studies and contemporary research indicate that belief in God has immense pragmatic value, leading to greater mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Now, let me be clear. This does not mean that there are not exceptions to the rule. The general rule here appears to be pretty clear, but there are always exceptional cases. In fact, the combination of chemical imbalance, personal neuroses, and mental illness with religious belief, especially when that belief is distorted or unbalanced, can be quite harmful in certain cases. Unhealthy religious beliefs can result in unhealthy experience and a lack of personal well-being. But based on these findings, such experience appears to be the exception, not the rule. The experience of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, my personal experience, and the experience of so many others in our world today testify to the pragmatic value of belief in God, the practical benefits of belief in a higher power. Honestly, I think this should make us reconsider some things. One thing that really comes to mind is the promotion of atheism in our society. in what could be called atheistic evangelism, the attempt to proselytize the religious, talk believers out of their faith, and win the undecided over to the atheistic cause and belief system. I want to be careful how I say this, but based on these findings, those who don't believe in a higher power may want to think twice about evangelizing the religious or the undecided. If it's true that belief in God supports a person's overall well being, then the act of trying to talk people out of their faith is ethically dubious at best. This doesn't include trying to talk someone out of distortions, or trying to open someone's eyes to possible perversions of faith. Though I do have some questions as to whether non-theists have the ability to prudently and properly discern between a healthy religious belief and an unhealthy religious belief, which leads me to believe that such counsel should mostly come from fellow religious people, rather than non-religious people. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Theism, belief in God, gives people meaning, purpose, and hope, something that I have personally experienced throughout my life, and something that these studies all demonstrate. I understand and have always understood why theists would want to share their faith with others. If I'm being honest, I do have a harder time fully understanding the impetus on the other side. To be fair, as someone who is not a pragmatist, I do agree with the idea of placing truth above pragmatism. So if I didn't believe in God, I think I could make a justifiable case to give people truth instead of a crutch or an opiate or a dream, as Freud or Feuerbach or Marx would have put it. I can also understand that if you truly believed that religion hurts societies, that you would have a desire to curb religious belief in your community out of sincere concerns for the greater good. The idea that religion hurts societies is a very uncertain claim, however, and seems to conflict with many of these findings. Either way, this is certainly something to think about and something to consider, as the research should inform our ethical decisions and our moral choices. Thanks so much for listening. This episode, and all episodes of Thinker Sensitive, are available on thinkersensitive.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app today to listen to more thought-provoking content from Thinker Sensitive.